The street was cordoned off with yellow tape, flashing red-blue lights painting anxious shadows across brick walls and broken windows. Sirens wailed in the distance, the night thick with anticipation. A SWAT team stood in formation, armored and alert, their movements precise, efficient, and mechanical. And amid them, standing like a statue, was a frail-looking old black man in a brown coat and weathered cap. His name was Robert Wilson, 72 years old, eyes lined with decades of sacrifice, back bent slightly, not just from age, but from history. "Hey, Grandpa!" one of the officers shouted, a smug smirk splitting his young face. "The nursing home's across town. You lost, old man?" The joke landed. Laughter echoed from the cluster of officers. Robert didn't flinch. His eyes never left the building, apartment 402, where a man with military-grade explosives held 3 innocent hostages at gunpoint. SWAT had been here for hours, stalling, preparing to storm the apartment, but progress was zero. The suspect hadn't responded to negotiations. The tactical team was gearing up for entry. "Sir, you need to step back," barked a younger officer, stepping forward with an outstretched arm. "This is a restricted area." "I live there," Robert replied quietly, lifting a gloved hand and pointing to a second-floor window. The officer scoffed. "Sure you do, and I'm Batman. Now get the hell out of here before we drag you." The laughter returned, sharper this time. Robert gave a faint sigh and took one slow step back, not because he was intimidated, but because he was calculating. He had been ignored before. He had seen this story play out in 100 different forms. Black, old, unimportant. He had reported the strange man coming in and out of the building at 3 a.m., the smell of chemicals, the suspicious boxes. But security had waved him off. Later, they said. That later never came. Now chaos buzzed through police radios. Building plans were being studied, and no one saw what Robert saw. The failure in positioning, the missing blind spots, the trap that was about to be triggered. "This is going to go wrong," Robert muttered under his breath. Then came the final call. "Team ready to breach in 60 seconds. He didn't wait. He stepped forward. "Hey, stop!" one officer shouted. 2 men lunged and grabbed Robert by the arms. "What the hell do you think you're doing, old man?" Captain Richards stormed over, furious. "Get him off this scene, now!" But Robert didn't shout. He didn't resist. He simply said the words. 5 words that stopped everything. "Delta Force Commander, Operation Tempest." The world froze. Captain Richards blinked. Officers stiffened, heads turning. Radios went silent. For a split second, time seemed to hang on Robert's voice. "What?" the captain stammered. Robert didn't repeat himself. Instead, he added quietly, "Sector 7, access code 479 Alpha Charlie. Check it." The captain's fingers trembled as he relayed the code through his radio. Seconds passed. Then came the voice on the other end. "Confirmed." Richards turned pale. I apologize, sir," he stuttered. Robert didn't blink. "You have 20 minutes before that building turns to dust. He's rigged it. Not just chemicals. I've seen wires, electronics. You're not just walking into danger, you're walking into a death trap." Now they listened. Across the scene, respect shifted like a seismic wave. Officers who had laughed minutes ago now looked to Robert for direction, but he wasn't done yet. "A month ago," he began, his voice firm, "I reported unusual behavior in apartment 402. I saw him bring in chemical containers. No one cared. I warned security again last week. Nothing." Lieutenant Maya Cruz stepped forward. "If you know the building, we could use your insight." Robert nodded slowly. "Apartment 402 has a structural flaw. A passage between it and 404, not in your blueprints. He's expecting you to breach from the front. He's watching. But there's a way in. The hallway leading to apartment 402 was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The peeling wallpaper and dim overhead lights gave the corridor the feel of a forgotten memory, haunted and waiting. Robert Wilson climbed the stairs one deliberate step at a time. No SWAT backup, no weapons drawn. Just an old man with a past more dangerous than any gun. He stopped at the fourth-floor landing and took a breath. His knees ached. A fragment of shrapnel from a long-ago war nestled in his leg like a cruel souvenir. But pain was an old companion. It never slowed him down. It reminded him he was alive. He raised his voice, not loud but resonant. "Simon, it's Wilson." A long pause followed. Then came a voice, hoarse and low. "Commander, is that really you?" "In the flesh." "Could be a trick." Robert didn't move. "Eagle 7, November Alpha." Silence. Then came the click. 1 lock, 2, 3, 4. The door opened an inch. A single bloodshot eye appeared in the gap. Then the door creaked open wider. Simon Mercer stood in the doorway like a shadow of the man Robert once trained. He was thinner, wiry with graying hair and hands that shook ever so slightly. But the most striking thing wasn't the deterioration of his body. It was the crack in his mind. His eyes darted like a cornered animal's. "They said you were dead." "Almost," Robert said gently. "Can I come in?" Simon stepped aside. Inside, the apartment looked like a makeshift war room. Blankets covered windows. 2 tripwires glinted near the entrance. On a table were blueprints, wires, and electronics. And in one corner, 3 hostages sat bound, but unharmed. One was sobbing softly. "Sit," Simon said, motioning to a wooden chair across from him. He had the detonator in his hand, thumb hovering over the trigger. Robert obeyed without flinching. "You trained me better than anyone," Simon said, his voice somewhere between reverence and accusation. "But they abandoned us. Beirut, the cleanup, no pension, no record, just silence." "I know," Robert replied. "Do you?" Simon's face twisted. "Because I've been screaming inside this head for years. Nightmares. No therapy, no meds, just this." He lifted the detonator slightly. "This is the only thing that listens." Robert's voice was calm. "I saw the signs. I saw you in the hallway 3 weeks ago. The way you moved, the eyes, I recognized the loadout from your bag. You were prepping." "You saw?" Simon whispered, startled. "And I tried to warn them. No one listened." "Same story again," Simon said bitterly. "A black man speaks and the world turns the volume down." Robert looked around the room. "The charges, the wires, you've built this like a mission, not a massacre." Simon's hand trembled. "I didn't want to kill anyone. I wanted them to know what it feels like to be invisible." Robert leaned forward. "You are not invisible. I see you. I've always seen you." Outside, SWAT buzzed with uncertainty. Cruz was pleading with Richards to wait. Carter was pacing like a lion ready to pounce. "He's not coming back," Carter insisted. "We go in now." "5 minutes," Cruz shot back. "Give him 5 more." Richards stared at the clock. "We go in at 0. Inside the apartment, Robert shifted slightly. "Simon, I need you to remember something." "What?" Robert gestured around. "You've set this place up for tactical defense. You covered every angle. But you forgot the first thing I taught you." Simon blinked. "Always account for hidden passages." Simon's eyes widened. That moment of hesitation, just half a second, was all Robert needed. In a blur, the old man moved. Years of muscle memory surged like electricity. In one swift motion, he lunged across the table. His hand knocked the detonator from Simon's grip before his finger could press down. The next morning, headlines screamed across every major paper in the state. "Forgotten hero saves hostages." The 5 words that froze a SWAT team. From invisible to legend, who is Robert Wilson? Footage from the police body cams had already gone viral. Millions had seen the clip where an elderly black man, mocked and dismissed, uttered 5 words that made elite operators stop mid-step. The moment hit a national nerve. "Hey Grandpa" became a symbol not of humor, but of institutional blindness. That afternoon, Robert Wilson was invited, not summoned, to a federal building under tight security. No charges, no reprimands, just questions. In the room were 5 men in dark suits, and one woman who wore her medals like they weighed 1,000 pounds. On the screen behind them, grainy images flickered, photos of covert units, maps marked with red X's, heavily redacted mission briefs. Most were stamped classified, never existed. The oldest official cleared his throat. "Mr. Wilson, Commander Wilson, let me start by saying you saved lives yesterday." Robert didn't respond. He sat still, hands folded on the table. The man continued, "But there's a problem. What happened yesterday also exposed something we've been trying to keep buried." A button press revealed a profile. Simon Mercer, former Delta Force, declared dead in 1990. Another slide. Operation Black Hawk, Beirut. "This never happened," the official said. "But the man you subdued referenced it, and so did you." Robert leaned forward. "You erased them," he said quietly. "Not just the missions, the men, their trauma, their families, their futures." One younger agent shifted uncomfortably. "We did what we had to. Those operations were off the books." "And what did Mercer become?" Robert snapped, eyes flashing. "A ghost? A walking time bomb? He begged for treatment and got silence. You made him into a monster and then waited for someone else to clean it up." Silence. "We need your help," the woman finally said. "Mercer might not be the only one. We've uncovered chatter. There are others. Isolated, unstable, forgotten." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Now you want my help?" "We need someone who knows them," she said, "who trained them, who they'll listen to." Robert paused, then spoke with the precision of a man used to command. "I'll help on one condition." "Name it." "I want full reintegration for every forgotten operative. Treatment, pensions, records unsealed, and official recognition for the fallen." The room erupted. "That would cost millions," one shouted. Robert stood. "And how many lives will it cost if you don't?" 3 months later, in a nondescript gray building near the city center, a new nameplate was bolted onto an office door. "The Tempest Initiative. Director of Operations, Commander Robert Wilson, retired." Inside, walls once bare now held photographs, portraits of men and women who had vanished into the fog of unofficial war. Some returned with limps, others with scars deeper than flesh. They didn't need judgment. They needed acknowledgement. And Simon Mercer? He was the first patient. No prison, no charges, just healing. Lieutenant Maya Cruz visited often. She had requested a secondment to the initiative. Where others dismissed Robert, she learned from him. But not everyone found peace. Lieutenant Carter had not only faced public outrage, but internal investigation. The footage of his arrogant dismissal of Robert circulated like wildfire. Under pressure, the department demoted him, stripped of title, reassigned to a rural administrative post. No command, no press briefings, just paperwork and silence. Long after the headlines faded and the city's attention turned to the next crisis, Robert Wilson sat in the quiet of his apartment, surrounded by ghosts only he could see. Photographs of soldiers lined his walls, some in uniform, some smiling beside families who never knew what truly happened. All of them bore one thing in common: they had served without recognition. Names erased, operations denied, wounds untreated. And Robert, he had stayed silent through it all. Until now. The knock came just past midnight, not frantic, not casual, precise. 3 short raps, then 2. The pattern made his blood run cold. Bravo Echo. A code, not used in decades. He opened the door slowly. A man in his 60s stood there, tall, lean, eyes sharp like broken glass. "Kowalski," Robert said, his voice low. "I thought you were dead." Kowalski stepped inside without a word. His hands trembled, not from age, but rage. "They're watching us again," he whispered. "Since Mercer, since the Tempest launch. Some of the others, they're scared." "Good," Robert replied. "It means they're still alive." Kowalski shook his head. "One of them disappeared last week. Davis, remember him? In Arizona. Gone. No trace, no obituary, just wiped." Robert's jaw clenched. "This isn't over, Commander," Kowalski said. "Just because they gave you an office and a fancy plaque doesn't mean they've changed. You know that." Robert nodded. He did know. The system rarely reformed itself out of guilt. It reformed out of necessity, fear, exposure. And what they feared most was the truth coming out. Robert walked to a drawer and pulled out an old cassette recorder. He slid in a tape marked Tempest Echoes and hit play. The room filled with old static, then voices, scrambled, clipped. Black Hawk unit compromised. Burn the records. Wilson doesn't make it back. He doesn't exist. None of them do. Kowalski's face darkened. "You kept this." Robert stared ahead. For when silence became too expensive. The next morning, Robert met with Lieutenant Cruz in Wilson Hall. She noticed his serious expression immediately. "What's going on?" she asked. He placed the tape on her desk. "This is why the Tempest Initiative exists. This is what we were fighting all along. Not just abandonment, but erasure." She listened to a few seconds before turning pale. "Why give this to me?" he said. "Because the department won't protect me if this gets out, but it will protect you. You still believe the system can be better. I believe it too, but only if people like you carry the truth forward." She reached for his hand, unsure what to say, but Robert simply smiled, the same calm look he had worn when he walked into a building full of explosives. "I'm not afraid of dying," he said. "I'm afraid of dying without being heard." That evening, Lieutenant Cruz uploaded the audio to an encrypted cloud. She filed a sealed report to Internal Affairs. She activated a fail-safe protocol created just for the Tempest program, Public Integrity Cascade, a digital dead man switch. If anything happened to Robert Wilson, the tapes would be released. The next week, Robert testified before a closed-door congressional committee. The room was dark wood and polished arrogance. Senators leaned forward as he spoke. He told them about Operation Blackhawk, about Mercer, about the erased names, and about how veterans became ghosts when their usefulness expired. "You call us heroes," he said, voice unwavering. until we're inconvenient. A younger senator, perhaps expecting a soundbite, leaned in. "Commander Wilson, are you suggesting the United States government intentionally abandoned its own?" Robert didn't blink. "I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it." Murmurs rippled. He ended with one sentence that echoed far beyond the chamber. "We don't need your statues. We need your memory to last longer than the war." Outside, reporters swarmed the Capitol steps. Robert walked slowly through them. The limousine was silent inside, the kind of silence reserved for heads of state and those who'd once walked too many battlefields to be impressed by polished leather or tinted glass. Robert Wilson sat quietly, his eyes scanning the streets of Washington, D.C. as the car passed monuments built to men far less forgotten than himself. Soldiers stood in bronze, generals in marble, but nowhere was there a statue of someone like him, a shadow in government files, a name crossed out by bureaucrats in ink far colder than blood. The gates to the White House opened. Two Marines stood at attention as he stepped out, his limp barely noticeable now. His uniform was immaculate, not because he wanted to impress, but because it was the first time in 30 years he was allowed to wear it in public. A White House aide escorted him through a side entrance, not for media, not for ceremony, just for truth. "6 months had passed since the day Robert Wilson walked out of the White House with history finally rewritten behind him. But he didn't retire into silence, not this time. Instead, he began teaching, not tactics, not weapons, but perception. His classes weren't about how to shoot, they were about how to see, how to listen, how to notice the things the world told you to ignore. And in every class, he started with the same words. Respect is not a rank, it's how you treat people when no one's watching. At Wilson Hall, new recruits sat straight-backed, their pens moving quickly across notepads as Robert spoke softly from the front of the room. Behind him was no PowerPoint, just a whiteboard, and a wall of faces, portraits of veterans once erased from existence, now reclaimed. He pointed to them. Each of these men and women were once invisible, he said, until someone bothered to see them. At the back of the room, someone shifted in their seat. Carter, no longer lieutenant, no longer swaggering with arrogance, just a man trying to understand what he had missed. He kept quiet, took notes, listened more than he spoke. After class, he approached Robert. "I used to think leadership was about giving orders," he said. "Now I know it's about recognizing whose orders never got heard." Robert gave a single nod, and whose silence was actually wisdom. Outside of the classroom, the Tempest Initiative had expanded to 3 cities. Cruz now ran the second location in Chicago. She brought the same fierce clarity Robert saw in her that night outside apartment 402. Every week, she sent him reports, veterans located, families reunited, hidden traumas brought into light. One particular file caught Robert's eye. Subject: Julian Reese, former sniper, presumed dead 1991, currently homeless in Baltimore, showing signs of severe PTSD. Robert didn't send an agent. He went himself. The shelter was loud with coughs, muttered prayers, and the rustling of paper-thin blankets. In the far corner sat a man with wild eyes, clutching a coffee cup like it was a grenade. "Julian," Robert said gently. The man flinched, looked up. Recognition flickered, then disbelief. "Commander." "Still alive," Robert said. "Still listening." Julian's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was the only one left." "You're not," Robert replied. And I'm not here to save you. I'm here to bring you home." 3 weeks later, Julian was in treatment. His sniper call signs now served as meditation anchors, not triggers. He began speaking to young police officers about the cost of being unseen. He ended every talk with a simple line: "One man found me. That was enough." On Robert's 73rd birthday, the mayor of the city tried to host public celebration. Balloons, podiums, cameras. Robert politely declined. Instead, he spent the evening on the rooftop of his building, watching the city he had saved flicker with lights like scattered fireflies. In his hands, a folded note. From Cruz. "Today, the recruits asked me why you never yelled, never barked orders, never tried to prove anything. I told them, because when you've done the work, you don't have to shout. Your presence says it all. Happy birthday, Commander. We still hear you." And so Robert Wilson, once mocked as grandfather and pushed aside for being too old, too black, too quiet, became a legend not through force, but through presence. His story was never about vengeance. It was about restoration. His war was not just against terrorists or enemy nations. It was against erasure, against systems that forgot the very people who held them up. He never asked for statues, but Wilson Hall remained, a living tribute. He never asked for praise, but every young officer who paused before acting, who listened instead of assuming, that was his legacy. And every time someone asked how the world changed, they said,